Picked the wrong week to quit sniffing glue.
The year is 1987, and NASA launches the last of America's deep space probes. In a freak mishap, Ranger 3 and its pilot, Captain William Buck Rogers, are blown out of their trajectory into an orbit which freezes his life support systems and returns Buck Rogers to Earth 500 years later.
Well, welcome back. If you recognize the intro from the one and only William Conrad and the splash page image, whichever I haven't decided to choose yet at this point, then you'll know what the subject of this week's build is, and that is the Ranger 3 from Buck Rogers in the 25th century. Now, that was I would hesitate to call it the lesser known half-brother of Battlestar Galactica, because it shared a lot of similarities, a lot of the same props, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, it's been a while. It came out like it was like Galactica wrapped up, and then they went straight into Buck Rogers. I don't think that they overlapped, although they might have. I don't remember that well, but I remember seeing the Buck Rogers movie in the theater, the pilot movie. They did that a lot back then. They also put Galactica pilot movie in the theater. Universal, not too shy on trying to get multiple squeezes out of the same rock. So I remember seeing the Buck Rogers, and of course the scantily clad women were the main drawing feature. Go back and watch the original opening credits to the pilot movie. You will wince at how they're trying to do a James Bond here. How overt they are. That's all I'll say. Overt is the kind word. But anyway, I digress. This was a kit that I had seen for years. I mean, years. This is from Timeslip. This is from George over at Timeslip. Now, George had been bringing this thing to Wonderfest for years upon years upon years. And it's one of those kits that you go, okay, well, I don't have money for it this year, I'll get it next year. I don't have money for it this year, I'll get it next. Well, all of a sudden, he stopped bringing it. And it's like, George, do you have any of those shuttles left? George came to Wonderfest last year, and I swapped him out some vinyl for one of his 1999 ships. I said, do you have any Ranger 3s left? He said, yes, I'll bring you a Ranger 3. So finally, I have a Ranger 3, and I brought it home, put it in a stash, and then not that I didn't think, well, because it's something that I wanted to get to eventually. And then what was the instigating thing, you say? What was it that pushed it over the edge? Well, I got this thing in the mail. This is 5 pounds of book. I want you to look at that thing. This is 5 pounds of nothing but the best sci-fi reference you'll ever see. This is the Greg Jean auction book. Now, knowing the prices that are in this book, this is about all I'm going to ever be able to afford from the Greg Jean collection, is a book of pictures of his collection. Because the prices in this thing, the cheapest things in the world are still in the hundreds of dollars. But I was amazed and amused at some of the stuff he had in his collection. One of the things he has is the filming model of the Ranger 3. Now, you're not going to find better reference pictures than this. So that's what pushed me over the edge to decide, yes, I am going to go ahead and build this. He also has he also had the Starfighter and the Draconian Marauder. I mean, and a lot of the costumes and Aaron Gray's helmet, things like that. Things that you thought were long gone. Oh no, they were in the Greg Jean collection. So this is what I'm going to be building this week. This week's going to be a weird week. I've only got a limited amount of days. So I don't know if I'll get done with it this week. That's my intent, because it's a simple kit. It's all in the painting. But I don't know how much I'll get done. So without much further ado, let's meet the 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's meet the 6. Let's meet the 6 parts. And as I said, here are the 6 parts of this kit. You have a big one-piece rotocast resin body. You have a tail fin. you have the two big engine thrusters that go on like this. And then you have inserts for the engine thrusters in case you choose to light them up. I don't know if I'm going to light these up. It would be a simple thing to do. I just don't know if I'm going to, because I still need to figure out some sort of way. There are no landing gear. Some sort of way to display this. I don't know whether I'm going to stack it like that. That might even be the best way, since room is becoming a real and serious issue around here. So if I choose to display it like that, it's awfully heavy. Like I said, this is hollow cast, but there's still plenty of resin in there, and it's got some nasty seam work that needs to be sanded and cleaned up and rounded all along the mold line here. So there's still an amount of work to do on it. Of course, the big deal is going to be painting the red stripe on here. There is a sheet of decals to give me the NASA logo and the United States lettering and things like that. So we will be able to add some detail to it, but it's all going to be in the weathering detail of it. Let me pull up this book again of these pictures to show you. Of course, that's the full-size shuttle. This is I don't want to break the back on this book. I refuse to do that, so I will not open it the full way. But I wanted you to see, there is a side view picture that has all the reference you'll ever need to have. And then there is a 3/4 view, a front view, and a 3/4 view. Again, to give you all the reference you will ever need. Now, this brings up an interesting issue. And it was the first thing, starting bid $6,000 on this thing. The starting bid is $6,000. So I will be curious when this is all said and done what the prices actually ended up being. Now, the issue that first springs to immediate attention, we get this is 5 pounds worth of paper. That's a ream of paper, my friends. If you wanted to figure out how much that weighed. Again, here's the shuttle here. Now, on this kit, on this casting, there is the thin line here between the two front windows. Perfectly in keeping with the shuttle design. No issue there. I looked on the model in the Greg Jean kit. This is missing. Now, you could assume perhaps that broke off in the intervening years, because his kit or his filming model has an interior. This does not. I will not be putting an interior in this. I'll just be painting these black. This will be more of a shelf queen than it will be any sort of be-all end-all model. Were I to cut this open and try to put an interior in it, that would be a completely different animal. But this I would have assumed was just broken off. But you go back. I went back and watched the premiere episode, that movie that's on the DVD set, for the very reason of that's the purest reference you're going to get for how this looked on screen. And it's true, a lot of the exterior shots you see this guy in here. But when you're looking from Buck's point of view out the window, it's gone. This is one big window when Buck is looking out the screen when he sees the Princess Ardala ship and the fighters. Anytime you see Buck's point of view out of the cockpit, this is gone. So I'm going to remove this because I think it looks better without it. Plus, it makes it look that much less like a shuttle. I know that it's probably a victim of the fact that there may have been a smaller scale filming model that wasn't all that, bells and whistly. Might have been the one that had the lights in it. Don't know. I don't think if there were two filming models, and if the Greg Jean version ever had this in it, and it just broke off later, I think I'd like to make it look like the Greg Jean kit or the Greg Jean filming model does at this point, which means it's got a lot of weathering on it. I'm going to try to maybe even make the colors a little bit more faded. They'll be more into the faded orange and faded yellowed whites and grays, more so than the bright white and black you might expect on a shuttle. But that's my goal. I'm going to get rid of this and do it up like the version that I see in that book. Pouring through the contents of the descriptions and the photos even more, you'll see the full size did not have the full-sized version that they used for a couple scenes did not have that stanchion between, or that divider between the front windows, so even more reason. But you'll notice that it goes up and down. It actually peaks in the center. You see where it goes up and then comes down. This actually goes the other way, where it comes down. It has a downward arc, not an upward arc. So I don't think it's worth trying to cut another one in to see how the bottom also should be arced the other way. That's only on the full size set, the set piece. It's not that way here. It is more correct to the model here. So I think just removing that centerpiece would be enough. Now it does not say this. It doesn't say in here. It does say that it's 17.5 by 12 by 8, which makes this studio scale. This is actually a 1-to-1 filming model scale. But it says that this kit, or this prop, was used in a pilot episode as well as the opening sequences, but it does not say whether or not it has the lit halogen lighting in the engines. Halogen was what I believe that they used for the Vipers and the Cylon Raiders and the Marauders, and it was standard for the model company, or the model house that was doing the Larson projects, to do that. Here is the Starfighter. Now let's see. Usually they say in this kit, or in this auction, that if there is lighting in the kit, or why do I keep calling it a kit? If there's lighting in the prop, that it's usually untested, and it doesn't even say that. So I am presuming that this did not have the lighting in it. Let's see. Expertly painted in studio, distressed in grays, blacks, and red with tipped decals. Shuttles and embellished with classic NASA body design and crew compartment, aerodynamic wings, two thrusters, and a static rudder. Machined mounting armature is installed in the belly, used in the pilot episode, like I said. Minor exhibiting age, minor paint chipping, scuffing, and production use. So $6,000 will get you, well, $6,000 will start you in the bidding for the actual thing. But when you put the two side by side, it's pretty darn close. George did a great job on this. Now, I will say that there's maybe some panel line missing. No, it's there. It's there. I was thinking that there were some additional panel lines that were missing there, but they all seem to be there. Yeah, but it's just, it looks maybe a little fatter, a little wider here. I think what it is that the skin, or the shell of the ship, is a lot thinner here, and it's a lot thicker here. I think that's the only difference. But I think that's going to give us our grays and our it says red, but that's reading very orangey, which makes me think this is probably the better color reference, is that picture there. There, looks better already. Get that off, level it up with the rest of the windshield. I think that'll be nice. Now I've got the spur cut off, or the pour spout cut off of the tail fin, so that's ready to go. And we have more of a Ranger 3 looking thing. I think the hardest part is going to be mapping out that red stripe, figuring exactly where that goes, because it has to start here, go down, wrap around this cylinder, go underneath it, and then come out to the wing. You're just going to have to map it out with some tape. Maybe make a vinyl mask for that to get it ready, but Nice thing about these heavy panel lines is that it's going to be easy to mask to those. Like this is where the warm whites and ivories show up. There's a couple of warm gray panels, and then this is more of the gray underside. Alrighty, so I've gotten all my files and implements of destruction out, files and sanders and sanding blocks and blades and all that, because I needed to get rid of the one and only seam on the body, and it runs all the way around the top, and you can see it here. I'm wondering how much of that shadow is going to keep showing up when I go to put the first coat of primer on there. Sometimes they never ever, no matter how hard you try, they never ever completely disappear. And then of course you have to go back in and rescribe the panel lines here. But I can see this very obvious line right there that we're going to see how much of that is stained in the resin and how much of that actually is a difference in elevation that can be addressed with filing and sanding. Alright, I've got the three main pieces attached. I've got the two engines and the fin, and they've got some seams on them, but to me, as long as I can keep those seams consistent with these other panel lines, I'm happy. That's just another panel line. It doesn't have to be a perfectly seamless blend if I can justify that it is the same width. As long as there are not any big gaps here, but as long as I can justify the same width, then I'm happy. And the same thing with this tail. There is a seam line there, but there's already a panel line that goes, ooh, sorry if that bugs anybody. That, I know some people don't like that scraping sound, so I won't do it. But as long as I can keep these lines all similar, then I can hide the rest of that in paint, or actually maybe even accentuate it in paint. Alrighty, we've got a nice gray on everything, and I'm just going to let this cure a bit. It is showing me some spots that I need to sand or address or otherwise clean up that weren't obvious on the white resin, but became obvious once I put some gray to it. I like this thing. I don't know what it is, whether that's a glitch in George's mold or what, but it's produced, looks like a bad weld there that needs to be sanded down, and I didn't see that at all when it was still in the white. Okay, I've got that little bumpy thing removed. I've got some putty in there kind of leveling that back off. Did some more sanding up in here on that seam that became obvious once I put the primer on. It's not all that bad. I did a better job with it than I was thinking. But yeah, we're ready for a little bit of drying on this, a little bit of curing on this, and then we'll hit it once again with the gray primer just over the spots where I had to do some repair work. All right, I think we got a good place to stop for today. I just laid in some of the darker grays. Got the medium gray going down around here, and I'm kind of mapping out where the nose cone demarcation is. And I painted in a base color for the windows, and I've got the engines based in. But that's a good amount of progress for today. Seeing now I only started this mid-morning, I think we're doing pretty good. Good morning, everybody. It's Tuesday, and work is continuing on the Ranger 3. Now, I have got everything masked off that does not want to be white or some version of white. Everything that you see here gray needs to be, I'm going to start with a base color of insignia white, and then we're going to age from there down to get the browns and the grays in and that kind of stuff. I know there's a big gray panel right in here, and a couple of other ones we'll mask off individually, but I want to get a good shell of insignia white Tamiya on here. Here's my mystery. Tamiya, Mr. Tamiya, if I can speak to you personally for a minute. Mr. Tamiya, why don't you make insignia white in an airbrush color? And if you do, why don't you advise more people to stock it? I cannot find a regular Tamiya bottle that I can use in my airbrush of insignia white, either flat or gloss. It's a mystery. I just don't get it. It's such a handy color. You should have it available. Alrighty, I just brought the ship back in from outside. It's been drying out on the deck for a good while, and it's already looking much more space shuttle-y. It's a little bit creamier in real life than I'm seeing on my camera. Camera is making it look a lot more stark white. Let me see if I can adjust the color balance and see if that will help. That's pretty much it. But we're going to let that shell of a, we're going to let that paint color dry for a good while. And then we're going to peel the tape back off. But I think maybe before I do that, I'm going to map out which of these panels gets a little bit of gray on it, and then we can put the grays down. Oh, another important thing is I need to map out where the stripe is going to be. I need to figure out where the stripe is going to be, because that's not one of the decals that comes with the kit. So you get the decals that go on, the NASA name that goes on top of it, but you don't get the decal itself. So I need to draw that out, get some masks ready for it. And what I'll do is I will put a positive mask down of the red stripe, reddish orange stripe, and then what'll happen is I can mask around that, pull it back up, sort of like what you saw me do on the Kronos 1, where you put the positive mask down first as a placeholder, and then you mask around it, pull out the donut, and that'll give you the space for the actual painting. Okay, here is the stripe. It is going straight down the side of the wing. It's going straight up, but this is where it starts to wrap around all these contours. So in order to, and it actually came out pretty close to where I put this piece down first. It actually came out pretty close to that, but my question is, do I need to cheat that a little bit and bring it further back than it is coming? And to do that, I'm going to need to grab it with some tweezers. I'm hoping it's not going to pull up any paint. Doesn't seem to be. But if I do that, can I kind of cheat it back to the point where it is square with this line? Because what's going to happen is I am going to get this strip where I like it, and then I am going to mask both sides of it and then remove this piece so that I will have a hole that is this shape, and that's what I'll be painting through. Now I just was able, because vinyl is stretchy, I was able to square it up against this line here. I still like how that's landing, even though it's not lining up with the bottom of this anymore. So do I need to move that? I like this stripe. I like this very much. So we might have to move this guy to make it align better. Okay, here's the eternal question. We all know that any schmuck can get one thing to line up. If it only has to line up with itself, it's easy peasy. Getting two things to line up, that's where it becomes difficult, whether it's painting eyeballs or putting in stripes. Now, we're running into what I would call a basic asymmetry in the kit. The distance between here and here on one side is not the same as the distance between here and here because of the way it's designed. You'll notice these, if you look at it from the bottom, this wing goes up a lot higher there. So what I am trying to do is make the stripe go straight across. And we kind of have to forgive the fact or ignore the fact that this wingtip here is not as flat. Maybe you'll see better on the bottom here, but if you look at it straight up and down, you'll see that this wing goes up higher. That tells me that it's not symmetrical. Now, whether this is, you know, a bad design or a faithful recreation of a bad design, that really is secondary at this point, because I got to make sense of this. Now, both of these look good if you're looking at just the one and you're not comparing it to the one on the other side. I can get this to look fine as long as you don't stare at it. If you get it at a 3/4 angle, it still looks pretty good. The only time you really notice that it's not lining up is if you stare straight on at it from the back side here. If you notice that this is not as much space as this. And so I think we're going to have to live with it, because that's what we've got. So I'm going to go ahead and tape off the outsides of this, pull this off, and get ready to paint the red. Okay, so I have got the perimeter tape up now, and then I've removed the inner stripe, and this gives me the hole that I'm going to be squirting the paint through. And it's not a pure red like you would be tempted. It's more of an orange red. So I'm going to try to mix up something, and hopefully we will be happy with the color when we're done. I think that I want to continue to use Tamiya's. I've been using Tamiya's on the rest of this. The temptation would be to go in and maybe pull one of these, let's say I have like a red-orange, yeah, this on these model layers. I don't like, as a rule, I don't like mixing them. I'd rather use the same paint. So we'll see what kind of trouble we can get into. Well, the red stripe is on. It's mostly orange with a splash of red in it, because red is such a potent color that you only need a little bit to turn your whole batch red. Unfortunately, I think I mixed it a little thin. The orange was very thin paint, very runny, even though I mixed it up very well. And when I put the red into it, I didn't add any more thinner to it after that. But I think it came out awfully runny, and I'm afraid it might have creeped in under some of the masking. So I am going to let this go. I am trying to dry it artificially here by spraying just air on it to get it to dry in place so that it doesn't go a-wandering. But I'm afraid there's going to be some repairs that need to be done. I've removed all the tape, and one thing is abundantly clear. I did a crappy job. I did the absolute worst job of cleaning this thing. I thought I had gotten everything on it, but I thought wrong. There has been an enormous amount of paint lifted up, and that's because I didn't wash it well enough. Rule number 1: wash your resin, wash your parts. I did not heed my own basic rule, and I've got no one else to blame but me for the crappy results we're staring at. Well, we got to fix it. That's the thing we do. You look at it and say, okay, what needs fixing, and then you go at it. But what needs fixing immediately is well, we're going to let this dry, I think, but we're just going to have to clean everything up. There are some panels that need to be painted. Got to fix all of this up. I don't like that. I'm kicking myself still for how runny that paint was. That's why you're seeing all those spots where it creeped under the tape. It's because the paint was so runny. Or pressure was too high, or combinations thereof. So nothing to it but to get to work with the cleanup. Okay, so the reclamation is continuing. I'm trying to isolate the damage and repaint them only panel by panel where needed. I do have to go back in, of course, to this darker gray, do a whole bunch of work on that, but that was kind of expected. I'm going to go back in and redo the stripes. I had to take out this spot I was going to take out anyway, because that's where the American flag has to go. But I do need to go back in and punch up the areas and clean up some of the smudging, to be generous. But It's one step forward, two steps forward, one step back type of thing. The left side looks a lot worse. I'm going to have to repaint this entire stripe here, and re-gray this. Okay, it's starting to come back now. Starting to clean up some of the lines. I think last thing I'll do before we shut down tonight is maybe try to repaint that. I'd like to have that drying all night if possible. Well, before I do any more damage, I'm going to shut down for this evening. Got the orange stripe repainted. Yes, I need to touch up the white against it. Certainly I've got to work on those engine bells. But yeah, trying to do less damage from here on out. Well, good morning, everybody. It's Wednesday. It is uncharacteristically also the last work day of the week for me because I'm going to be out of town this weekend. Don't worry, the temple will be guarded. But I realized that I was beating myself up for really no good reason yesterday. I could come back in and I did some repairs on the paint. I've been doing a lot of stuff by hand and a brush. You know, you can't use an airbrush for everything. But I've been going through and picking at things and gently repainting those areas and repatching the plating where I could. And I was thinking to myself, you know, I am making this harder on myself than I need to, because what I'd like to do, you know, rather than starting to paint some of the, some of the aging, if you want to use that term, well, he's been in orbit or been in space for 500 years, so you're going to pick up some aging, was to do like what I should be doing, which is to paint this as new and then age the whole thing at once, rather than paint it in aged colors, if that makes any sense. Rather than going in with, you know, the brown streaking and painting panels that are brown and some that are yellower, I should paint this as fresh, put the decals on it as fresh, and then go back into it with an overall a dust color or sand color or something that will give the aged effect to it at the end. So that, you know, this is basically how you should paint a Viper, which makes no small coincidence, since, and I've been going back and looking at the timeline here, and Buck Rogers happens in that sweet spot between original Galactica, overlaps Galactica a little bit, but then it's running up. I think it finishes up right about the time they bring out the Crime Against Humanity, which was called Galactica 1980. I feel so bad for those of you out in the audience who never truly experienced the war crime that was Galactica 1980, only because we were, in those days, so starved for new sci-fi on TV. Even though we had Star Wars just a few years ago, we'd had Star Wars, we'd had Close Encounters, we'd had Star Trek the Motion Picture. We were still a few years away from Wrath of Khan. We had original Galactica, kind of spoiled by that. Larson brings out Buck Rogers, and we all rejoice. They even go into a second season of Buck Rogers that basically tries its best to be Star Trek, with the Hawk character substituting for Spock. But it wasn't until Galactica 1980 comes out that we realize that perhaps Larson he's run out of ideas, and the bloom was off the rose at that point. Galactica 1980 had precisely two good episodes. The pilot, which of course reused a lot of footage from Earthquake in the background because Universal owned the footage, And it also had the return of Starbuck, which is what anybody wanted to see, was what happened to Starbuck. Because, let's face it, Starbuck and Apollo were the series. And no amount of Troy and Dylan was going to make up for that. So I digress. But here we've got window painted. I'm going to do this nose in a slightly more silver, lighter gray with a silver mixed in. We've got to airbrush some jet exhausts around these guys. And I'm going to do some more work on the engine. This has become quite a heavy beast. I will tell you, in retrospect, it might have been easier. It would have been easier to work on this ship if I had left the engines off. It's such a clean paint line, or such a clean seam line, that they could have been stuck on at the end and still would have been fine. The benefit of waiting to put those on is that it would have been more possible to get in this area around where the stripe was, where the stripe is located. It would have been easier to paint into that area without those engines in the way. Now I'm just touching up some of the gray here on the main stripe, and talking to you while I'm doing it, but doing a little bit of the fine touchy touch work. I don't think I am going to get to, and I realized yesterday when I was thinking back on all the stuff that I had done and why the paint, excuse me, I got a cough. I'm back. I was thinking back on why I had so many paint failures yesterday. And yes, a lot of it was I did not adequately wash the kit before I started. But then I realized, hey, you know, all the work you've done on this, basically you did in one day. And you didn't let the paint dry. The Insignia white that I sprayed on yesterday morning, I only let that dry for an hour or so, really. By the time I came back from lunch is when I started painting on this, and that's not enough time. So I'm hoping that the fact that I have left this dry overnight again has toughened up the gray paint that's underneath here, or the paint that's supposed to be bonded to the primer. I'm hoping that a lot of that has happened overnight tonight, and it might be that next week will be, well, next week will certainly be the weathering. But I am pondering as to whether or not I'll even put the decals on today. I think I'm going to let all this paint dry, and then perhaps what I need to do is let everything dry, and then seal it. Let that sealer coat really sit in. So if maybe what I need to do today is get this to a point where I'm ready to put a gloss sealer over everything, and then that will allow adequate time for the weathering that has to happen. Okay, I just did a little bit of a lighter gray on the nose there, and then a dusting ever so slightly of a titanium silver just over top of that to give the proper metal wear version of that. So let's see how it looks after we have, oh hush, make me sorry I turned you back on today. This is a big model, a heavy model, and difficult to work with one hand while I'm holding the camera, because it wants to slide all over the place. Okay, that's looking good. Now, as I said, there will be the slightest, the ever so slightest blending coat on this once we put the weathering on. Right now I am doing the as launched version, maybe is the correct term, as far as all of the colors being crisp and dark. I want to go ahead in just with the tiniest spray of black, but I think even that might have to wait. So I'm happy with the nose, happy with that. I think the engines might need a little bit more work. Of course, the temptation is to do the big black scorching here. I still haven't put these inserts in. Since I'm not lighting them, I can paint this at any time and just plug those in. I think they will get a scorching black and then a dry brush of a metallic over top of that, a burnt metal sort of thing. And then we'll do the typical, thruster burns around here. I do want to see if there's any percentage in putting some black highlights here or some darker highlights. I think we're pretty much set on that with the exception of the weathering. Okay, I just picked out some of the obvious shapes on the bottom here and darkened them up, and then put some fades in here and some panel line work. And I think once it's all done, I might do some heavier streaking, front to back streaking on it. But for what it is right now, I think everything is in good shape. And I'm going to flip this over, and while I still have this dark paint in the brush, maybe touch up the engine bells from the top. I think we're in a healthy spot now to leave this for a goodly amount of time, and then we will come back and put a clear coat over this, and we'll be ready for decals. And I was thinking, they always say putting clear coat on white is dicey at best because you don't want it to yellow. Actually, I think I do want it to yellow. So I'm not going to be crying if for some reason over the years the clear coat turns a little bit. I think that may have been what happened on the actual filming model, because it looks like I know they spray models down with a matte coat so that no reflections show up on the camera when they're trying to do their compositing. And maybe that flat coat on a white model might be responsible for some of the aging that we see on the filming model today. So, happy accident if it works out that way. But I think what I'd like to do, let this dry, come back, spray it where the decals are going to go, and then the grand mystery will be exactly how we do the weathering. Okay, so I'm just back. I have put a good gloss coating on this. I'm going to let it set for the rest of the day. We've got a few decals that need to go on. The big ones that need to go on the stripes there, and the United States that go down the side, and some smaller incidental decals that have to go on, and we will look at getting those on. There's a number that goes on the tail there, and some miscellaneous stuff. And if I can get all of that done to the point where I've got the decals on, that would be a great spot to wrap up this week's work. Alrighty, I figure this ship has had a long enough time to dry, or the clear coat on it has had long enough time to dry, so I am going to endeavor to get some decals on this guy tonight, and let's see how she goes. Now I am going to trim these fairly close, but I am not, I am not on camera, but I am not going to try to cut inside of the carrier film, so wish me luck that I can make that disappear. Okay, there's the first side, or the main pen, or the main decals. There's some little bitty ones, but those are the main ones. And I think we've done a pretty good job of keeping them square and straight. I was worried about this one, but I kind of stand back and squint my eyes, and does it look straight? Yeah, it sure looks straight to me. And I noticed that if I keep the uprights parallel to the panel lines, then I have to assume that everything else is straight. I would rather, if it's going to be crooked, I'd rather be just as crooked as those panel lines than I would be to having it straight and having it fight with the panel lines, if that makes any sense. Okay, so that's all the decals on. All the ones that I choose to put on. I still have a couple, 3 randos down there, but I don't really have any good reference for where they might go, so I'm not going to risk putting them somewhere stupid. Now, they might very well go on the bottom, and we don't have any references for the bottom. So I'm just not going to worry about putting those ones on, but as for the big ones, they look good. Everything is looking fine here, and I think this is a wonderful place to wrap it up, and we'll pick this up again next week. And that is it for week 1 on the Ranger 3 build. It was dicey there for a while, but I think I might have pulled it out if I don't do something horrible to it next week when I go to do the weathering. So we'll find that out together. So until then, y'all be good to each other, be safe, be smart. Be back next time.
Let's get out of here.